So this plant is around 4 months old, maybe 5, and it's a pretty unique plant. Even without any psychoactive properties, it is a pretty attractive plant in my opinion. So this plant, I'm going to try to pronounce it. It's a Phyllodium, and then it has its species, and it's in the legume family. So it was pretty easy to grow. I just put it into the soil and left it in full sun and moist, and within a few days it started to germinate. I kept it in high humidity for about a week, maybe a month. I have to check my documents. No, actually I just covered it, yeah, for I think a week, because a majority of them germinated, and then once it stops germinating new seedlings, I tend to remove the humidity dome. So I did well in a full sun position. I did not provide any shade cloth, and yeah, it's been growing quite well. I moved up the pot size after I think 2 months. I didn't split any of the seedlings to keep the roots intact. I just placed it directly on top. And after replanting, I still did get a new sprout. You can see this very thin seedling. So the seeds are still germinating to some degree. And yeah, it's been growing quite well. There's some fairly large leaves. And yeah, so Julian, the inventor of the chenga, which is a smokable form of ayahuasca from Australia, he in 2017, I believe he received like an inheritance from a family member that died, if I remember correctly, and he decided to use that money to explore and research some lesser known plants that have psychoactive properties. And he traveled a bit and researched a few different plants, and after a while he came across this one. I believe he went to Taiwan, he wasn't able to find it, and then in Thailand he was able to find the plant, which is this one. So in 2017 he gave a talk on the Entheogenic Australis forum. He gave a talk, and there's a video of his talk which is labeled Ethnographic Explorations. It's a pretty good watch. It's around 45 minutes, I believe, and it is very interesting. And he also gives his report on his usage and his effects from this plant. So the main active alkaloid in this plant would be 5-meo-DMT, and it's the same alkaloid that's in the toad where you smoke the venom, but obviously this would be a better source ethically, since you wouldn't necessarily stress the frog or the toad for its venom. There are other sources for 5-meo-DMT. I believe it's from the Amazon, the Virola, the root bark. There's a sap that I believe is also high in 5-meo. However, for cultivation, it wouldn't be necessarily practical to have a massive tree to harvest from. And again, this plant is not very well researched, and from what I could see and find, his report is actually the only report of usage using this plant. he does give a very compelling argument for this being the ancient Soma drink and the religious texts of India. And yeah, I became very interested in this plant once I've read about it. I came across this plant, I believe, like the information on this plant, I believe back in 2001. And after 2 years, I was able to find some seeds. So I came across the information on this plant from a post on the Shroomery, and it included video and a bit more information. And in 2001, I read about it. I was very interested. I tried to find some seeds, but the shipping was actually far more than the actual seeds itself. So after a while, I gave up on it. And then again in 2003, the very end, I came across the European vendor, Garden Shaman, and he had this plant in stock. Originally I got the wrong seeds, but they replaced my seeds with the correct ones. And yeah, in December I sowed the seeds, and they've been growing quite well. So in my time with this plant, obviously it's still quite small, but I've attempted quidding 1 gram and 2 grams. And with the 2 grams, I used slacked lime or calcium hydroxide, and it was very, very alkaline, and it burned my mouth. So I will not be using slacked lime again. I will be using sodium carbonate, which should be enough to alkalinize and freebase the 5-MeO. So if on my attempt with 4 grams fresh leaves there is no effect with quidding, I will abandon that idea, and my following attempt will be trying to reattempt Jillian's 50 grams fresh tea using 50 grams fresh leaves. And yeah, this is a very interesting plant. It grows fairly easy. I just water it once a week. This is almost pure topsoil, so there's nothing special. And this is in the full sun position. Obviously I'm not in a desert region, so you would have to use some common sense on where you should place this plant, but it does well in full sun and very bright shade. And yeah, I made a time lapse of its growth so far, and hopefully in the future I can share my experience working with this plant. And I've mentioned in the past it has a lot of medicinal uses in Asia, and they have uses for the stems and the leaves as well, and I believe the roots, but not as commonly used. So one of the bigger usage is for a very heavy menstruation. It helps stop it. There's also uses for stomach aches and other ailments, but so this isn't a plant that you would have to worry about its toxicity. Obviously do not mix MAOI, since it could be a deadly mixture with 5-MeO. And again, this is not a very well researched plant, so use caution and common sense. Don't get yourself hurt or injured believing that it's safe to just consume it recklessly. all these plants have incredible power and deserve respect. So don't just, oh, I'm gonna just use this to get high. I use all of my plants in a religious sense, and I'm just sharing my experiences in this in the usage of this plant.